Well, hello, friends. I love talking about books. I love talking to authors. This book is going to blow you away because you're going to get so much information. But first, let me introduce the author, Jay Payleitner. Did I say that right? Payleitner?
Yeah.
All right. So, Jay, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hey Tricia, good to be with you here. Well, I got 5 kids. I got 8 grandkids. I got 4 daughters-in-law. Life is good. Um, Somehow, in the last 20 years, I've written more than 30 books for
Mm,
all kinds of publishers. Almost all of them for in the Christian publishing industry. Um, I did spend a decade on in advertising on Michigan Avenue, writing TV commercials for Corona beer and Midway Airlines and Kroger grocery stores.
wow.
That was a whole different lifetime ago. But oh, my passion is family and living your best life kind of thing. My best-selling book, always worth mentioning, is 52 Things Kids Need from a Dad. Sold almost
Mm,
200,000 copies of that book. 52 Things Kids Need from a Dad, and then did some marriage things. Um, and I also was just blessed to be able to produce Josh McDowell Radio for 14 years.
wow.
A lot of your listeners and viewers would know
Yes.
Josh McDowell. With Chuck Colson, I produced his Christmas Angel Tree radio program every year. With Michael Tate and Toby Mack, I did Jesus Freaks Radio, writing scripts for them and producing them. So what a great blessing it has been in my life to be able to work in this Christian world of Christian media and hang out with you, Tricia. That's a feather in my cap.
Oh, I love it so much. I love this book. What we're going to be talking about in just a second is about conflict and not escalating. But this morning, when I was doing my quiet time, I'm reading through Ephesians 4, and it came across this, and I'm like, this fits perfectly. And I know you have this in your book, which is, "In your anger, do not sin, and do not give the devil a foothold." And that's Ephesians 4:26 through 27. So that goes so perfectly with this book. Don't take the bait to escalate, which then I have to read the subtitle because this is great. Conflict is inevitable. Being a jerk is optional. And when I saw this cover, first of all, it's so interesting, and then I just laughed out loud when I. So tell us why you wanted to write this book.
Well, all you gotta do is live in this world right now and realize that we've got
Hmm.
all kinds of conflict. And then we all have our favorite tools. I mean, when you see a problem, we think, how can I apply my tool to that problem? I mean, if you're a prayer warrior, I mean, we're
Yep.
praying about the world right now and all the things going on.
Hmm.
And if you're a billionaire, you might throw money at a problem. And if you do a podcast, or you might, dedicate an hour. But I'm thinking, well, I need to write a book to help, to help take talk people off the ledge
Yeah.
and see how to use conflict and such. Um, and I was talking to my agent about it, and I was taking notes and kicking around some headlines. At the same time, the folks at Salem Books were in a marketing meeting, and somebody said something about, "Boy, that's a problem that we can't let escalate. That's a we shouldn't take the bait to escalate." And Tim
Wow.
Peterson said, "That's the title of a book." And so they
Mm.
laughed about that. And then not long after that, Tim said, "You know what? I bet you Jay Payleitner could write that book because he knows that I take
Mm.
complicated issues and deep, maybe even sometimes a deep theological issue, and I'll just kind of make it, oh, here's how it applies to life. This is something very readable." And before we opened here, Tricia, you said, "Boy, it's easy to read. You enjoy
It
reading."
is so easy to read, yeah.
And that's kind of what I do with all my topics. Uh, I suppose you could lambaste me because sometimes I make things too simple, but, too easy. It was like, we need to work this through. But and then so they called me, and I had a contract for a book, and the subtitle, "Conflict is inevitable. Being a jerk is optional." I was like, let's do that. It was like because we wanted to say in a subtitle, you need to kind of tell more what the book's about,
Mhm.
and it needed to say expect conflict. It needed
Yes.
because and it also needed to kind of say here's how to handle conflict, and here's how to handle conflict is like, oh, that could be a really long, laborious subtitle, but it's like just don't be a jerk. So
Right.
so conflict. Uh, conflict is inevitable. We can all agree on that. And being a jerk, that's optional. Don't do that.
You don't do that. And you talked about like there's conflict is going to happen. But some things, because I'm listening to the audiobook, which is fantastically done. By the way, very well done, very entertaining. Great job with that. And it's such a good reminder because we have 10 kids. And just things that I am taking notes on as I'm reading the book and going down is like it can conflict will happen, but maybe it's for a good purpose. Like maybe there's a conversation that needs to happen between you and your teenager because maybe they do want to stay out later. Maybe you can help them grow in responsibility. You have those talks about what's required of them. So I think so many times, or in marriage, maybe there's a conversation that you need to have had for a while, and it's that little conflict that gets you to finally deal with the conversation that you kind of been pushing to the side. So what I love is yes, there's going to be conflict. No one likes conflict, but why do you think, and I know you talk about this, why do you think that sometimes we can benefit by going through the correct steps when dealing with conflict?
Well, absolutely. I discovered in writing this book, I did when I started writing it, I wasn't sure I was going to discover this, but
Mm,
conflict is a good thing.
mhm.
Let me do a quick aside. You're applying this to your family. There are a lot of good books on conflict out there, but they're mostly business books or
Right,
leadership.
right.
This is across the board
Mhm.
business and spiritual conflicts and family conflicts and Thanksgiving dinner table conflicts. And you're exactly right. Curfew conversations with your older teenager. That's a conflict. But here's the point. Um, Conflict, Tricia, can strengthen a marriage.
Yeah.
Uh, Competition in business, competition is conflict, and that leads to new ideas and creativity and people doing their best work. Uh, Rivalry in sports is
Mm,
conflict, but man, that's what makes it fun. Without conflict, there would be no heroes, no mentors. There'd
mm.
be no compromise, which is a wonderful thing. Sometimes there'd be no empathy. There'd be no rules. If there's no conflict,
Right.
there'd be no rules. And rules are good things to live by. There'd be no apologies, which is a wonderful gift that God has given us, the ability to be forgiven and ask forgiveness. That comes after a conflict. And even God's deeper truths come out in conflict. What is it? James chapter 1, trials of many kind.
Yeah.
Uh, they, 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 they test us and they produce perseverance. So God's going conflict. That's a good thing. Let's see how we can use it, and don't be a jerk. By the way.
And don't be a jerk while you're going through it. Now, one thing that I love, you talk about the business and relationships and church conflicts and all these different things, but I was amazed you were able to figure out these 4 factors and how they can apply across the board. So let's talk about that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. In all my books, I love telling little stories and then having a
Mhm.
takeaway from them. So
Yes.
when I started jumping into this book on conflict, I just started writing little vignettes of conflict. Some of them are from personal experience, some from.
Peanut butter. Peanut butter
Uh,
is from personal experience.
Ask me about that again in a second. Uh, yes, but uh, um, anyways, the point is that when I was writing these actually 21 sample conflicts, all
Mhm.
different kinds, fiction, real life, business, friends, um, I realized that they all had some things, similarities, and I kind of boiled it down to the 4 factors, and that's
Yeah.
maybe we should spend the rest of our time today kind of plowing through that. The 4 factors are when you come into a conflict, and it's a conflict that could be you've been thinking about for a while and you're going to enter it intentionally, or it could be one that just slams into you. What you got to do is decide what you really want. Now,
Mm.
Tricia, not what you want, but what you really want. Dig a little deeper into it. Okay, so you've done that. You know what you want. Figure out what you really want out of this conflict, and then know the risks, because there's always going to be some kind of risks that you're taking, that you're putting them through. So know the risks. The third, we could use a little more empathy in this world,
Yeah.
and so it's empathize with your adversary. See if you can walk in their shoes. A little bit of the golden rule: do unto them as you would have them do unto you. The idea of what do they really want? Just you don't have to always give it to them, but you kind of have to know what they want. So
Mhm.
empathize with your adversary. And the fourth of the four factors is just a little optimism. Expect the win. Uh, so many people these days just go into a conflict for the sake of being just jerks and such. But you know what? Go in there with the optimism that everybody can win, and it could be that win-win thing, which is a little bit of a cliche. But expect the win because it's all going to work out. Maybe not right away, because Romans 8:28, all things will work out for those who are called and according to God's purpose, of course, which makes it tricky sometimes. So that's the four factors. Decide what you really want, know the risks, empathize, expect the win.
I love that, and it's a once you I mean, these need to be on a Post-it note, like, all over my house because we have 5 kids still living at home, me, my husband, and my 92-year-old grandma. These are all these people, they all want certain things. They all want their own things. They all so there's the conflict is happening all the time, and I think I'm a better parent now that I'm older, and I'm sure you can relate because you realize, like, everything doesn't need to be a battle. And so I love how you said decide what you really want because when they were little, I thought I really wanted them to have matching clothes when they went to church and have, their hair done. Now I'm like, if we have shoes on and we are all in the car and we can get there on time, like I'm fine. So what I really want is our kids to have a relationship with God, to be at church. What I thought I wanted was for them to look like JC Penney
Really?
models or whatever. So it changes so much. So once we start thinking through these things, I think so much, don't you agree, that so much of the things that we build conflict around can almost be eliminated just almost with that first one, deciding what you really want.
Wow. Good. I may use your story in later interviews. Let's get back real quick to the peanut butter.
Yes,
Can you do
yes,
that?
let's talk about the
All right.
peanut butter. That's great.
Okay. So early in my marriage, to the wonderful Rita, we've been married 40 some years now. Okay, so it was tragic. It was truly tragic, Trisha, because Rita liked creamy peanut butter
Mhm.
and I like crunchy peanut butter.
I'm a crunchy fan. I'm crunchy.
I heard that about you. Okay, so here's the point. And it was conflict. It truly was. And I think we kind of worked it out that we'd compromise. So that one week we would buy crunchy, and when that jar ran out, we'd buy creamy. That was our compromise. But if you really want to apply the four factors to it, um, decide what you really want. Decide what you really want. I wanted crunchy peanut butter, but what I really wanted was my marriage to get on his right foot. My
Right.
marriage to Rita to love me and appreciate me and give me smooches once in a while, all the kind of things all the great benefits of marriage. So that's really what I really wanted, even though I wanted my crunchy peanut butter. But then knowing the risks, I didn't apply these four factors back then, but I'm thinking about it how it now.
Right.
Knowing the risks, if I was a jerk about this or insisted on my crunchy peanut butter, I would get less smooches probably.
Mhm.
Okay, so there are risks involved, even in any fact. When you're okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. Then comes that third one, which is you remember is to empathize with your
Mhm.
adversary. And I use the word adversary in the book throughout the book because it is the person who you are in conflict with. Rita was not my adversary, but maybe in this case she sort of was. Okay, so
It's not like enemy. It's like a
right, right,
softer
right,
version of
right.
enemy, right?
So I'm trying to think. Well, Rita likes that's reasonable. That's not unreasonable for her to want her creamy peanut butter. All right. So and then expect the win. But here's the point. This was a gift from God. If you approach this all with a little hopeful attitude, we are in the grocery store one day, and it turns out that we looked at the peanut butter. We were at the peanut butter aisle. We were broke back then, so a lot of peanut butter, and
Mhm.
there was half a jar of crunchy peanut butter at home. Well, we'll buy the creamy peanut butter now. And suddenly, Trisha, we had 2 jars of peanut butter in the cabinet, and that's okay to have 2 jars of peanut butter. What a great answer to the conflict,
Mhm.
because again, we approached it with love and respect, and the four factors. So that's one of the first stories in the book, and it does get people thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I guess conflict is part of life. Doesn't always have to be terrible, but you got to deal with it.
Yeah, and I love that, which it goes to number 4, which is expect the win. I think if we start and I think escalation first, and I wrote a book called Calming Angry Kids because we adopted from foster care. So learning not to escalate the in anger was huge. When you have a kid screaming in your face, it's like, I got to stay calm here. So the escalation can be emotional, but even we hold grudges. Like it doesn't always have to be like in that moment we're yelling and screaming, we may not want to forgive. We may hold grudges. All these things, when if we go to expect the win, we're already thinking like, how can we
Mm,
both win in this
mm,
situation? And so for me, I learned if I don't escalate emotionally with the child, I stay calm. It helps them to stay calm. And then I'm able to win by helping my child calm down. So it can be these emotional things, it can be grudges, all these things. If we start looking for the wins instead of like how we're feeling in the moment, because in the moment my heart might be pounding, I might be angry. It's okay,
mhm.
like emotions are a very real thing, but if we stay calm and not escalate emotionally, we can start looking for the wins and realize like, oh, whether it's peanut butter or where to go on vacation or whatever it is, we can start figuring out ways. And when we are going to the other person and we're suggesting wins for them, then it helps everything,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
good, good. Um, of the 21 kind of scenarios that I've built in the book, each chapter ends with, okay, we've made all these points, we've talked through this
Mhm.
issue. Then it ends with, you have a choice now to to escalate or de-escalate,
Yeah.
and everyone's different, but in general, the ways to escalate a conflict is kind of either maybe assume the worst, or act too quickly, or maybe act too slowly, or maybe letting it fester. Golly, when things or injecting anger in there, or fear can get in there, or maybe some obstinance gets in there. And then, in general, the ways to de-escalate is to use the four factors, but also to see the big picture.
Yeah.
Maybe you're gonna, in the short term it's going to be harder, or you're going to fail a little bit, but the big picture you're going to win. Uh, and a little listen and forgive, uh, apologize. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes the quick apology. Yeah, I did a fire in my backyard, old campfire kind of thing, and the smoke went around the room, around the corner of the house, and it was no big deal. But my neighbor was really ticked off about it. Came out, oh,
Mm.
what's going on? And I made some joke, and but about an hour later, I went over and apologized, and then suddenly it wasn't an issue. If I wouldn't have gone over to apologize,
Mhm.
suddenly that's because, again, I needed to empathize. I needed to, what I really wanted, I was not to have an angry neighbor. What I
Right.
and the risk is that if I don't go over there, don't deal with it, it's going to get worse. It might be a whole terrible summer where he's mad at me, or throwing stuff on my lawn. Who knows? But
Yeah.
but a quick apology is one of the answers for one of the scenarios in the book.
Absolutely. And so I love you go through all the scenarios, and even at the I guess near the beginning it says the de-escalation strategies, and then you go through different sections, but some of the things that you talk about is see the big picture, think before speaking, get the issues out, do what you do best, consider worst case scenario. But you walk us through all these things, and really this book would be great for Sunday school classrooms, for families to go through together,
Mm,
for women's small groups. I think because every one of these chapters, and I love how you said even if you think there's not going to be something like you're not a businessman, so you think you can skip over the chapter, the
right.
business chapter, you're going to get something out of it because you're going to see how people can handle situations. You see how they can work through conflict, and you can see like personal application. So even if you think like, well, only half of this book applies to me, no, actually, the whole
Mm.
thing applies to you, and you can step through these different sections.
Other Another quick one that just comes to mind is the idea of a drunk driver backing into you in a parking lot late at
Mm,
night.
yeah.
You think about that for a second. That's not something you can plan for. That's not something that's it's really not going to, no matter what happens, it's not going to turn out well unless you apply the four factors. So what do you want
Hmm.
then? First off, what do you want? You really want not to get punched in the nose.
Yeah.
You don't want, I
That'd be
mean,
good.
you get out and really, really do some real damage. You don't want him tearing away. Um, So and then you need to talk about the risks of how you deal with this. Get out of the car slowly. Don't accuse him of anything, kind of thing. And then empathy with him. What's he going through right now? While you're waiting for the cops,
Mm,
as Christians, we need to empathize with him, see what he's going through. You don't want him getting back in the car driving away.
right.
And when it comes to the idea of expecting to win, maybe this is the best thing that ever happened for him. Is him meeting you, seeing that there's a decent guy or gal, decent person there, and maybe he's hitting bottom now, and the cop comes and writes him up for DUI or whatever, and then he hits bottom and he gets cleans up his act, that kind of thing. So you just never know when a conflict is going to give you an opportunity to share the gospel or to be a Christian
Hmm.
witness or to love your neighbor or to love your spouse or to ask forgiveness. Conflict is a real opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, each one is, or you could be a jerk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking now, I mean, kind of the bigger picture of conflict, world events. There's, war in the Ukraine. My daughter is a missionary there. She lives in the Czech Republic.
Oh my God.
And her church, so there's, Czech Republic, then Slovakia, then Ukraine. So they're about 5 hours away from the Ukrainian border. Her church has taken, as of a week and a half ago, when I talked to her pastor, has taken over 1,000 refugees from the border. They're sending buses, they're sending cars, they're picking up women and children and families. They have a refugee center, they're putting people in homes. So conflict is not a good thing at all. Like that is a bad situation. But the church is extending their hand.
Yeah.
They're taking in refugees. They're loving on people. Um, my daughter's hoping her pastor approached her about starting she has small groups for moms anyway, community groups about doing it for Ukrainian women. And it's like we can see that the bigger picture here is now we have an opportunity to share Christ with people that are in a lot of conflict that don't want to be in conflict. They're in also conflict because they're in a new country. They don't speak the language in this new country. They don't speak Czech. They're having to communicate in English or broken English, and so we can really see. And you talk about that too, about how God the gospel talks about there's going to be conflict, but when conflict happens, these situations can be to the glory of God, as
Yeah.
hard as it can be.
Um, Before we run out of time here, need to make sure that we tell the story of John chapter 8 of Jesus
Mhm. Mhm.
drawing in the sand. What a model that is for
Yeah.
dealing with conflict. Now, when if you start talking with someone about conflict in Jesus, or chastising someone for being angry, they'll say, "Well, Jesus got angry. He turned over the tables in the temple, so I can be angry." It's like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
There's a difference between righteous anger and what you're going through. But the more interesting story, the more compelling one to me actually is when Jesus is teaching in the temple court, and some Pharisees come up and they're trying to trick him, and they say, "All right, we've got this woman who was caught in adultery, and
Mhm.
the Old Testament, well, the old law says that she needs to be stoned. What do you say?" And did Jesus respond right away? No. He uses this. I
Mm.
stumble across this word. What a poise! A little poise. A little.
Mhm.
Take a step back and give everyone some time to breathe and think about what's going on here, which is a great strategy for
Yes.
very many conflicts. Take a step back and let the other person think about it. And of course, what he did was he didn't say anything. He just kind of stooped and drew in the sand. Now I don't know what he drew. He might have written out some laws. He might have written the names of the Pharisees or some of their sins,
Yeah.
or who
Yeah.
knows? He just kind of just doing something so that they could take some time. Uh, and then he finally stood up and said, you who are without. I'm paraphrasing. Whichever of you are without sin, feel free. You can cast the first stone. And what is fascinating about it is we have this image in our head of the Pharisees one by one dropping the stones and walking away. Uh, John 8 doesn't say they have stones in their hand. He,
Oh, right. Right.
the woman isn't even there. I don't think they're just well, I guess she is, but the point is, yes, she is there, of course, but The point is, they literally, they figuratively or metaphorically drop the stones and walk away. Of course, it's the older, more mature Pharisees that walk away
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
because maybe they have more sins, or maybe they're at least smart enough to kind of realize what Jesus is saying. You can picture these young punk Pharisees going, "Well, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to
Yep,
get my stoning
yep.
in." Well, all that to say, um, they leave, and Jesus turns to the adulterous young woman and says, "They don't condemn you, and neither do I." But
Mhm.
he doesn't leave it at that. He gives her an instruction: "Go and sin no more. Go and
Yeah.
sin no more." So at the end of the whole conflict, he still his truth is coming out. So that would be the goal,
Mhm.
maybe, for our own conflicts. Take time, and at the end of it, see if somehow there can be some truth that rises to the surface that we can all hang on to. My golly, wouldn't that be world be a better place, Tricia?
Absolutely, and I love those points. First of all, the first one is take time. I think
Yeah.
so many times we think we have to solve it, like,
Ah, well,
I
well.
just learning, yeah, instead of if there's a conflict with one of my children, if I sit there and nag them or discipline them immediately, they're just going to get angry. Like, it's not going to resolve anything. They're going to be upset. I'm going to be upset. Instead, say, well, let me go think about it. We'll talk about that tonight. And it is amazing how by the time you get around to talking about the issue, you've both had a time to calm down. You're able to pray. You're able to process. You're able to think about instead of, spouting out, you can't have any electronics for the rest of your life, which you both know is not true. You could say, well, that was a wrong decision you made, but this is a consequence. You're able to talk through it at such a better level. And I think I love how you just tied that into Jesus. Like, he didn't immediately just start spouting all these things. He had poise, and I think that would, if anything, if you take anything away until you get the book, of course, order the book. But as you're waiting for the book to arrive, or as you're waiting to go to the bookstore, just take that time, take a breath, think through those four factors that Jay talked about, but take the time and realize, like, you don't have to respond immediately, because usually if you respond immediately, you're not going to be responding in wisdom, are you?
There you go. Yeah, the book also has a couple chapters on tactics and tricks, and that includes many of the things you just talked about. Well, excellent. Thank you so much. Hey,
Yeah.
we are in this part, this conflict of darkness and light here in this world. This
Hmm.
we are not home yet, so we need to figure out how to get Jesus. Jesus is on our side, but we need to remember that and invite
Yeah.
him into our life, because Satan wants us to have conflict that doesn't have positive resolutions.
Hmm.
So yeah, let's fight that. Let's fight that darkness, kids. Work to do.
I love that so much. Well, the book is excellent. Highly recommended. I want to hear more about where people can connect with you, or maybe if they're even interested, like, okay, this guy can really help our community or help our church.
Hmm.
Is it possible for them to connect with you to maybe come and do workshops or speaking? Tell us all the things how they can find you and connect with you.
Well, thank you. My website is not quite as elaborate as wonderful with all the cool stuff that yours has, Trisha. And I know you got lots of fans and friends. But yeah, I do have all my books are there, and I would love to come speak. I was just in San Antonio a couple weeks ago. Spoke
Mm,
2 days ago at a men's conference in Springfield. We laugh, we cry, we learn something. So yeah, I'd love to do men's retreats, women's teas. I do that. I fill some Sunday pulpits once in a while. Um, I would. I have not. I need to do that. Put together a good talk on conflict resolution. I haven't done that yet, and it would be
there
based
we
on
go.
the book.
Yeah.
So track me down, and it's my website, my first and last name, jpayleitner.com. jpayleitner.com. Hard to spell, but you guys can figure it out.
And
Um,
if you look up the name of the book,
yeah,
you remember this
yeah.
maybe easier.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Don't take the bait, escalate, and
just
there his name is spelled on
yeah.
there.
There you go. There you go. You Google "Don't take the bait to escalate." You'll figure it out, folks. That's how technology works these days.
Yes.
Um, all right, there you go.
But it's so easy to read. It's funny. It's an enjoyable book about conflict. I will say that right now. So, Jay, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Tricia, let's do it again sometime. God bless you.
That that would be perfect. Thank you.